go ahead and get started. We are the Classroom Media Group, and the problem that we're working on is, I'm sure we've all experienced professors who can't seem to handle the lights in the classroom or get the projector to do exactly what they want. So we're trying to solve that problem for them. So we'll introduce ourselves. I'm Dan Gustafson.
I'm John Brown.
I'm Frank Danny.
And I'm Jeff Hutter. I'm going to begin with the analysis of our problem. We went out to many classrooms, took pictures, and even did some interviews of professors. A lot of things we found were poorly labeled controls, unorganized classroom interfaces, counterintuitive switches, lack of good feedback, a lack of standardization. A lot of times, I'm sure you guys have been in many classrooms, you'll see there's many different interfaces out there, none of them provide good feedback, that kind of thing. So I'm going to go through some of the pictures I took, some examples of what we have. This is one of our favorite examples here. I found in a classroom. The professors or users have actually drawn an arrow on the wall connecting these switches because it happens to be the forwardmost lights, which they use common when they're doing stuff on the projectors. So they link those two switches together with this marker so that they can easily turn them on and off when they're doing presentations. They don't want to go hunt for the switches. And you can also see they're all labeled here. All the labels among the different classrooms, I'll get to it later, but they're labeled differently because each time somebody else is labeling them, so there's no standardization there. In addition, here you have a lot of switches. Maybe too many. Is there too much control? Maybe we should take away some of that freedom. Is it unnecessary? That kind of thing. This here is the DVD player / CD player interface. This one is more common amongst a lot of the older classrooms, but still you'll find some variation depending on, like I said, the age of the classroom. Is it a newer building or an older building? The machines have been updated. Here you have some of the wording here, DVD, VCR, wired mic, and computer. Once again, as I went to many of the classrooms, some of them are labeled in this nature, others are not labeled at all. Some may have different wording as well. Here, once again, you have quite a few switches of a different variety, whether it be a slider switch or just a plain switch. And again, the wording is oftentimes different among the different classrooms. This particular classroom, I did one of my professor evaluations, or interviews, I guess you call it, and the professor had trouble finding this particular switch over here, which is the switch to raise and lower the projector screen. And I requested them to do that task, and since all these other switches are placed on this other wall, even though it's close and relative, they still struggled to find that additional switch, so it took them extra time to find that one because they were unfamiliar with the classroom. Here you have, trying to point out the labeling. This is one of our favorites, downlights. Oftentimes we ask ourselves, what did this person mean when they said the downlights? It's not really a good fitting word for a light switch. Here, this is the control module for a lot of the projector functions, as far as if you want to do a DVD or a VCR input, or even a laptop here. One nice thing about this control is that it provides some visual feedback over here for the volume. That's always nice to have when you're trying to adjust the volume. You can tell if it's actually going up or down, because a lot of times the volume is not on continuously, so you can see what's going on there. There's a close-up of it.
So one of the main problems that we saw, especially when looking at the pictures, is that there was a big lack of consistency in all design. So when we looked at the first stages of design, we took a look from a user's perspective and what tasks and functions they would want right away. With the operation of the main classroom lights, raising and lowering the projector screen, and using the laptop to project an image on the screen. When applying user-centered design, we first started out with about 3 or 4 different prototypes and designs, whether or not to use sliders compared to knobs. But overall, our goal was to make it easiest for the user and to form a consistent interface that could be used. And at first, we wrote down some sketches, taking in all considerations of what needed to be, or what users would want to be done in our touchscreen interface. Here's some rough sketches of knobs and sliders and things for audio. And from here, we came up with this design.
What I'm going to
talk about is primarily the design that we arrived at. We decided to go with kind of a touch screen interface versus another kind of analog interface because we couldn't organize and fit the switches in a single location coherently. So this is essentially our design, and especially for a novice user, we have a welcome screen to kind of give them a background on some of the key things they'll need to pay attention to. The next tab, we broke it up into 3 main categories that we thought would be most relevant to typical classroom use, and that would be the lights, the audio, and the mic tab and projector. And the first tab is the lights. And once again, there's 2 options on the top, providing the user with basic directions, especially if it's their first time. And as you can see, the whiteboard is active because it's depressed and highlighted. And to activate a light, you can press, for example, press on front, that would press and highlight that, and you can adjust the corresponding intensity of that light by dragging the slider. The next main tab was the audio and mic tab, which we originally called the audio tab, but some of our users were having some problems kind of identifying the location of the microphone volume. So we went ahead and incorporated that into our design. And then in this case, it's the same instance. It's consistent across the interface. Once again, you just press a button to activate it, and when it's active, it'll become highlighted, and then you can adjust the corresponding sound level just by pressing and dragging. The third tab, this is one of the key tabs in the interface. It handles all the input for the devices, including the laptop, DVD, and the Elmo machine. And once again, by pressing the item and indicating it, it'll show that the item is active and in use. And then another thing I'd like to point out within our design is our decision to go with a nav bar along the top. One of the key elements. With some interfaces, you get stuck with like a back button and things of that nature. So in this case, the user can easily navigate through each of the different main categories without having to worry about getting lost. And they can always return to the welcome screen if they have any issues. And then another final thing, we had feedback about the buttons. Originally, they didn't have a border, and a couple of our users suggested they weren't well defined. So that's another kind of key design decision we made. It's a pretty minor thing, but I think adding a border to the buttons really does a lot to accentuate their purpose.
All right, so in order to incorporate some of the changes that John was just telling us about, we had to go through a testing process, our user-centered design process. So we conduct usability tests, which basically means that we ask the user to interact with the device as they would normally, accomplishing the normal everyday tasks that we assign them to do. We then record any feedback that they have for us, and I try to identify any potential problem areas that might come up, and then make improvements from there, and obviously iterate and go through the process until we're happy with the design. So the actual process, Jeff, if you could hold up the low-fidelity prototype we used, or that we just printed out the software on little slides, and then had people touch the slides as if they were.
And then the last one is you could just turn on the Elmo machine so that it projects an image on the screen. Alright, very good. Next, if we could have you operate.
We were pretty happy with. The user said that our design was easy to learn, simple to use, and just kind of straightforward. It did what they were hoping it would do, which meant that they could accomplish any task that they wanted to. We had a high user satisfaction rating. We had an average rating of 9 on a 1 to 10 scale, which meant that our users were satisfied, which is what we were aiming for. So just a visual breakdown of the user satisfaction. You see all the ratings are quite high. And just some suggestions for improvement that they gave us. John sort of mentioned them, but here's just an overview of them again, particularly the slider controls and the visual feedback and the microphone controls, which were improved greatly on the second round of design.